you're the first and true inventor of a new and non-obvious process. How do I verify that claim? I go to my peers. I go to a peer system involving other patents to determine whether in fact you are the new inventor of that. And there's a convergence of what's called prior patents that's done in a peer fashion to determine if your claim is in fact new, is in fact non-obvious. If it's not, we interact and negotiate to find that white space where your inventive contribution comes into the game. All right, back to Socrates. What does it give you the right to do? Anyone? You'll love this. Absolutely nothing. You don't get the right to do anything. You get the right to exclude others from making, using, selling, or offering for sale the invention, but you don't get to do anything yourself. It's a negative right. Just like a property right is redress of status. Someone infringes on my property, someone trespasses, someone infringes my patent, I get the right to exclude them. I do not get the right to do anything on my own. Who was the first U.S. patent examiner? Bueller? Anyone? Thomas Jefferson. Very first patent issued on potash in 1790. Patent number 1. We're over 10 million now. Here's an example of patents number 9,700,000 and change, which was a patent I obtained for Goldman Sachs for its Settlecoin cryptocurrency settlement system. And as again, it's sequentially, and we describe and claim the system intersecting how securities trading works with the power of the blockchain to automatically settle and clear trades. Okay, who invented the blockchain? Now we all know this. Yes, Satoshi. So Satoshi is generally believed to have invented the blockchain. And let's do a little bit of flyby. What do we know about it from today's conference? It's a data structure. It's containing blocks in sequential fashion or hashed to the blockchain, hashed to the data structure. It's time-stamped. You can verify by mining. It's immutable. It forks if there's an issue with it. You can't go back and change it. Distributed trust verification is accomplished in a peer-to-peer fashion. There's transparency depending upon the permissioning of it, but you can verify the transactions, and it solves the double spending problem. No, there's no double spending issue with utilizing blockchain and cryptocurrencies because it's inherent in the structure. Well, what do we know about the patent system? Data structure, blocks, issued sequentially. Once your patent is examined and successfully issued by the government, there it is. It's time-stamped. You get your filing date. It's immutable. It's issued from the government printing office. If you need to correct it, you get a certificate of correction printed from the office. You don't change the original document. And it's distributed trust and verification. Again, you're claiming this is new and non-obvious. I'm verifying that claim against the peer system of other patents. Transparency, again, disclosure for exclusivity. And it solves the double spending problem because you're not allowed to patent beyond the time allotted for the monopoly. You cannot have double patenting exist. There's 10 disclaimers to prevent that from happening. So, ladies and gentlemen, who invented the blockchain? I submit to you, based upon the evidence as I have presented it before you today, that it is not Satoshi. Just not Jefferson. So that's a cute analogy. It has its effect, and or maybe even, if you don't believe it was Jefferson, maybe he was in the room where it happened. Or it could even be the Babylonians, if we, as we heard from Charlie before. But it's not new. What it is a technological application of distributed ledger technology, which has been around for eons, but it's inventive insofar as its applications, the use cases. So it's all well and good, but what do you do with patents? Well, on September 12th, 2001, we used them to go catch terrorists. Goldman developed a patent portfolio in connection with 20 other banks and broker-dealers, creating a new network to provide transparency and information handling engines to show that our systems were not going to be used for illicit financing purposes. And our institutions were not going to be furthered by terrorist financing. So we filed a brief to the Supreme Court, arguing that this is exactly the type of incentive the patent system needs to encourage. And we were invited to argue the case alongside the parties in this because we had said, look, the patent system is about transparency, it's immutable, it attracts investment, it's a government-granted monopoly, it's disclosure for exclusivity. Technology was turned against us that September day. We're going to turn technology back against the terrorists and the financing. That was actually a result of the USA Patriot Act and the bank secrecy regulations and compliance regimes that was bestowed upon the U.S. banking and finance system as a result of the attacks. And the reason we availed ourselves of patents is we were trying to show that this is transparency. This is not credit risk. This is not some black box that we're denying people access to the financial system. This is to make sure that our institution is not used for illicit purposes. These patents, there were 40 granted, were expedited as inventions to combat terrorism. And the main inventor, David Lawrence, who was a former U.S. attorney, received an FBI Director's Award from Director Mueller. And these were means that were recognized having fostered public-private partnership solutions to the problem of illicit finance. Well, kind of a funny thing happened on the way to technology solving all problems, and that is the compliance regimes that were created, of course, are not to be fallen under one agency in the government, but multiple agencies. And the regulatory reforms, while well-intentioned and did protect us, have gone too far. There's been growing and pervasive exclusion and de-risking, which is basically another way of saying that you're thrown out of the banking system in the U.S. Over 25% of households in the U.S. are underbanked. 2.5 billion to 3.5 billion globally. So the well-intentioned safety and soundness of the financial system is leading to lack of access for people globally. Yearly 500 billion in remittances, and with the advent of cryptocurrencies and fintechs, free risk. Banks don't want to deal with you because you're involved in crypto, they don't understand it, you don't get a bank account. The growing regulation across jurisdictions has become rampant, the pendulum swung too far. This is an example of the simple regulatory framework that anybody dealing in the banking system has to comply with, and it's growing in complexity. Luke had a great slide before about the complexity in the system, whether it's visiting or not. Again, well-intentioned, but how do you deal with this? Perhaps a complex technology application can help solve for real risks. And the regulators have been rampant with fines. These are backward-looking fines levied on banking institutions, which was the #1 risk, as you saw in Luke's chart, for failing to comply with global compliance standards. So that really kind of led to the advent of Inclusive, which is founded by my partners, a former senior Treasury official, that under Paulson as Secretary of Treasury, and the head of technology regulatory supervisory for the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, to build out the system, to fix banking, to include people. So we are architecting financial engagement and digital access and compliance and payment system. 3 elements: core banking and blockchain, to drive inclusion digitally. For who? Fintechs, non-banks, corporates, NGOs, and charities. Charities can't get funding to where it's needed most. Because, again, where's the financing coming from? Where's it going? You have to know your customer. Very difficult compliance obligations for banks, and as a result, leading to correspondent banking network kind of falling apart globally, and of course the unbanked problem. Full compliance standards really standing at the heart of this. Again, not a finger pointing exercise, but the pendulum has just swung too far. We now have the technology and the means to really evaluate real risk. Know your customer. Is it you? How do I know it's you? Not someone pretending to be you. Blockchain can do these things in a highly secure and a highly compliant, architected way. We can have mobile access, you have a compliance server, and here's the key. if I do the know your customer right, then I can get deposits through a network of over 800 community banks that are allowed to pool their deposits. So it's not a small community bank having a high cost of having bank accounts for just a couple $100. It all gets pooled in the back end. It looks like a $100 billion institution that has a master account at the Federal Reserve Bank. And again, then you can overlay products, AI, things. These are all what a decentralized trust technology allows you to do. So who benefits? As we discussed, non-bank and fintech, correspondent banks, we can start to stitch that network together again. Corporates and small and medium enterprises, charity, nonprofits have particularly been hit hard. Individuals, of course. That's the core aspect of where we're going. So why kind of think about this, where do we go from here, why is it all important? I want you to consider, as we talked about, that the regulatory engagement and education as a key to getting where you want to go. Your patents around your token economies, describing what you're doing, being transparently backing your technology build, are great education vehicles. You should wrap them around the technology disclosures that you're providing to the government and use them as a way to engage in a positive way that you're being granted a legal monopoly from another agency in the government to disrupt. How about that for turning tables? So utility token, utility patent, disclosure for exclusivity, and a word about open source. It's not antithetical to open source at all, even though patents are proprietary rights. Remember I said it doesn't give you the right to do anything? It gives you the right to exclude others? You can use patents around your token economy to keep the open source open. And by that I mean people through the open source license are agreeing to defang their patent rights against you and users of your system in exchange for access to it. If they decide not to play ball, or there's an infringement action, or they get aggressive or proprietary with their rights, that license can go away. Now they're exposed to your technology. So it's a way of keeping everybody in the sandbox playing well together. And again, the right that you get from the government to control your own destiny. So I'll leave you with that. Even if you're not convinced with my Satoshi argument, always think, what would TJ do? Thank you.
Hello? What would Thomas Jefferson do? That's a good one. I'm going to have to think about that this week. Thank you, John Squires, for a captivating speech. Up next, we're going to have blocks, but before that, we're going to take a quick break, and we will resume our conference in 10 minutes at 3:45. Thank you so much. Also, at the conclusion of this break, we will be doing another raffle. So, let's go.
It was like a 40,000 rate. Right, so that's what I came, like I took less money coming. We've been good for some thanks, buddy. Like a weekend, people were like, you guys are wrong with yes. So I know we got now to do lunch, it's a little more difficult here. You actually have to fight for it. No, this is all right. Just sit back another 2 years. Lost the counts. Thank you, sir.
All right, just before we get started here with our next presentation from Blocks Consulting, which is another MUBC startup, we have our latest Raffle prize winners, which is Natalie Beats, if I'm saying that correctly, and what's that? Yeah, and then Corey Huddleston, correct? All right, so Natalie and Corey, we have Starbucks gift cards for you if you're in attendance, and if Wendy Henry's presentation from Deloitte. Thank you.
All right. So up next, we all know with new technologies, the initial developers and business use cases are overpriced and overvalued. It seems to the same way with blockchain technology, and blocks looks to even the playing field. Founded in Oxford, Italy, last month by 4 Miami students that all have a similar drive and passion. These students are Ashton Barber, Dario Desai, Jack Gilchrist, and Billy Becker. Blocks is disrupting the blockchain consulting atmosphere. Presenting today is Dario Desai, a software computer science major here and a founding partner at Blocks Consulting. Also presenting is Billy Becker, a junior finance major and founding partner at Blocks.
All right. Hello and thank you all for being here today. Here with Daria Desai, and today we will be talking about Blocks Consulting, our startup, as well as the role that blockchain is playing in the world of consulting. Since its creation, blockchain has been a disruptive technology and is transforming industries of all kinds as we know them. It can be implemented in an unfathomably high number of ways to solve problems across virtually every industry. By its very nature, blockchain will result in a paradigm shift, and every industry and facet of society must adapt. This shift has already begun to emerge in the consulting space. In the past few years, a new wave of entrepreneurs has emerged seeking to utilize blockchain technology in their projects. Because of this, there is now a high demand from said entrepreneurs for consulting firms that specialize in the implementation of blockchain technology rather than traditional financial consulting firms. With this in mind, Desai, myself, Ashton Barger, and Jack Gilchrist formed Blocks Consulting as a new age consulting firm that specializes in the implementation of blockchain technology. The four of us had previously met as members of the Miami University Blockchain Club, and there we discussed our collective passion for blockchain technology on a regular basis. Eventually, we were approached by an entrepreneur for the idea of making a peer-to-peer micro-insurance platform based on blockchain technology called TandaPay. We all jumped at the opportunity to make his idea a reality, and Blocks Consulting was born.
As Billy mentioned earlier, blockchain will lead to a paradigm shift and affect every facet of society. Right now, however, blockchain is in its infancy, and like any emerging technology in the past, be it like the internet or cloud computing, it poses a unique set of challenges. When we were approached by TandaPay to consult and develop their idea, we found that there was a massive talent gap in the blockchain space. We identified that the fact that there are not
guys settle in, I just want to make a quick note. We have 4 raffles coming up. So we have $40 of Starbucks gift cards to give out. If you guys stay around for that, we'll be having 4 raffles. And then after that, after Wendy and then after closing, we'll be having a development workshop from, I believe, around 5:15 to around 6:15. If you guys want to get hands-on experience with Solidity, stay around for that. Jeff Gilchrist will be heading that up. All right, thank you guys for joining us. So I want to introduce Wendy Henry to you guys quick. So Wendy Henry is a managing director of Deloitte Consulting and currently serves as the Global Public Services Blockchain Lead. She has deep experience working with clients to distill emerging technologies into simple business value discussions. As a blockchain evangelist, she has worked with blockchains since around 2012 and is active in several blockchain consortiums. Wendy is a hands-on technologist with years of large-scale, complex system integration experience across a wide variety of technologies, including cloud, digital transformation, and of course, blockchain. She and her teams are currently delivering multiple blockchain projects for her clients, and she's going to talk a little bit about that and what real value looks like in the blockchain world. Please give it up for Wendy Henry.
All right, so I'm between you and the end of the day. So I also have gotten to listen to just a lot of really great presentations throughout the day, and you guys have heard a lot of information. So I'll fast forward through some of this just because you've heard it. And then what I'd like to do is, although Ashley made it sound a lot better than it probably is, I am doing a lot actively with multiple blockchain projects across multiple clients. And I also do a lot with our college recruiting, both in technology and not in technology. So one of the things I'd like to do is just leave a little bit of time at the end to see if you guys have questions in general. Okay, so businesses globally are really perking up and starting to invest in blockchain. I'm going to show you a little bit later what the growth trajectory is, but we have seen a slow trickle of adoption. You heard that most people started to pay attention to it in about 2012 when the panel introduced themselves. It really came about in about 2008, late 2008, 2009, when Satoshi Nakamoto put out the white paper that I'm hoping every single one of you have read. And if you haven't, it really is a great piece. It's a short piece and well worth reading. But I'm not going to go into what is blockchain. You guys have seen that and heard that across multiple talks today. You've also heard a lot about why we're talking about it, what are some of the challenges and opportunities, because I know there's always challenges that we talk about, but I think we also need to focus on the opportunities, and we've talked a lot about it today. But I think one of the things that's interesting is some of the statistics here and how the market is actually starting to respond to this. In 2022, the estimate is that there will be $12 billion worth of blockchain spend globally. That's a lot of money, but it's yet not anywhere close to, if you look just a few years beyond that, the estimates are starting to get into the trillions. Now there's a wide variation in the numbers you will see here, right? You can go and check things. And when I get asked by my leadership, what is the market out there? Why should we invest in this? I can't give them a definitive number. What I can tell them is that the numbers are escalating, right? So there seems to be a continuous march upward in the estimates that we're beginning to see as more and more companies are starting to look to invest. Deloitte does an annual survey. It does it across Fortune 500 globally, and it's a really good survey if you want to go look at it. It's got some really interesting insights in it. But what we are seeing even through that survey is a consistent uptick. The other interesting part is that the U.S., which you heard me say today that I think our government needs to sort of step it up a little bit, in at least addressing regulatory and policy issues. But as a country, I would say we're close to being the leader. I won't say we're the leader. I think since these slides got made, and definitely if you take a look through, if you pull back the curtains and look behind them, China is spending an inordinate amount of money on blockchain and R&D. So I think we need to be careful about saying we're at the forefront just yet. I think there are some countries that have been doing a lot that we have not necessarily been privy to. I think Russia is also spending a lot of time and energy on R&D. You'll also see that with some companies, right? You didn't hear a lot out of Google about blockchain, and yet they have been significantly researching and doing R&D in the area. So just because you're not seeing it in the news, don't assume that it's not happening. The other interesting part, you heard a little bit about this today, is where we used to see industries, you saw FSI, right? Financial systems and services industry was one of the first to jump on this bandwagon because payments and settlement were one of the natural value propositions for blockchain. However, what we're starting to see is we're starting to see holistic ecosystems starting to form. So when you think of when Procter & Gamble talked about the Maersk trials that are going on, that started with shippers, right? So it started with shipping companies that had to move product across the ocean, if you will, on large ocean liners. And now we're seeing that insurance companies and underwriters and holistic ecosystems are getting involved in that. So that's another maturation, if you will, in understanding of blockchain and that what it can enable. And this is just, I'm not going to go into this, but you can see that there's not really an industry that's not looking at what is this technology and how can it drive change and optimization and new business processes and whole new business models, right? Nothing is, there's not, I mean, I think every single one of them's there. I don't know whether you guys can come up with another one. But they're actively investing and actively building systems using this technology. Okay, so here's what I talked about. And it's kind of interesting, and my counterparts in RPA hate me for this graph because it shows that RPA is going to peter out here. And the reason for that is that, how many of you know what RPA is? Robotic Process Automation. Does everybody know what that is? It really is what a smart contract does. So it's automation of manual tasks for the most part, or repetitive tasks that can be automated. Use this technology very simplistically, and I'm sure I'm bastardizing that. My counterparts would hate me, but smart contracts very much emulate what RPA does. But you'll see that there was, if you think about that Satoshi Nakamoto came out in 2008, right? And we're not even forecasting a significant uptick until 2023. That's a fairly long, flat runway. And when you talk about business and business having to invest, that's not something that your business leaders want to see. And so the question is, why is that? Right? Why is it taking so long for this technology that everybody is espousing to be transformative, and yet it's not taking off? And we talked a little bit about that today as well. This new business paradigm, which, remember, is on the fringe, right? It's not something you're going to build for yourself. It's not an internal system. And so in an environment where companies have had to compete, they're now going to have to embrace those partners on the fringe as well as partners in and out of the value stream into some kind of cohesive mechanism to realize the benefit that blockchain is going to bring forward. And so that's that whole consortium, right? And until we get people who understand this and can come up with the business models and understand how to come forward with the value propositions for all of the ecosystem partners, we're seeing that as almost a brick wall. So we get a lot of clients who will come in, they want to do blockchain, they want to be leaders in the space. They'll start building prototypes, and then once they get to that prototype, they'll even maybe get to a pilot. So a prototype is a very quick proof of what the system could be. When you move to a pilot, you actually have an operational system, but what you'll see with the building of blockchain pilots is we're emulating the players. So it'll be the company, right? So let's say we have a large oil and gas company, and they want to do a order to cash implementation, right? They will emulate all of the partners in that order to cash flow. And so they'll pilot it to prove out how the thing will work, but they don't really have the players to the table. I will tell you, I think it's done backwards. If you're going to go forward into a blockchain project, it would be better to get 2 or 3 of the players in the value stream that you're trying to emulate or trying to bring process reengineering to the table to get going together. The second thing is the regulators, which we talked a lot about today as well. The regulators need to catch up. Tokenization is going to be large. You guys are going to be in a world that's very different than it is today. But the regulators have got to come out with what are the boundaries there. We talk a lot about the technology, and right now I'm going to kind of end up with the technology because I want to then focus elsewhere. Never have we globally had the community around a technology the way we do blockchain. Globally, there are more people trying to solve problems around scalability and performance, but they are still problems. This is a nascent and evolving technology. I personally believe that today we're talking about blockchain, and blockchain has some very core components, right? It has the ledger, it has cryptography embedded in it, and it has a consensus mechanism. If you don't have those 3 things, you really don't have a blockchain. However, there are a lot of things. I don't know how many of you has anybody heard of IOTA? Okay, a couple of you have, right? Totally different, but it's a distributed ledger technology, right? It's foundational technology that brings that distributed ledger about, doesn't necessarily have the consensus mechanism, right? So performance is definitely a big one, and it's one that you will see most of the focus on right now when people say it's not ready to go. And it is going fast, and we'll get there. Data privacy and security. It does have embedded encryption. It does have a tamper-resistant ledger. It is not inherently secure. You have still got to protect your nodes, your machines that are running your blockchain, like you would any other computer, right? So there's nothing magical about it. It is a tamper-evident distributed ledger that sits on a computing platform that must be secured. So you have to bear that in mind. You also have to bear in mind that what's on that ledger is viewable to all of the participants in the ecosystem. And we have the public networks, right, where everybody can see that. You guys can log on to the Bitcoin blockchain right now, or you can log on to the Ethereum mainnet. And you're going to see all of the transactions. Now, the data may appear to be gibberish, but you can see it. When you're in a permission blockchain, all of the participants in that permission blockchain can see it. Now, let's talk about that from a business perspective. Because businesses have a lot of IP. They don't today share out through their ecosystem. So you have to be very, very careful as you model these systems in what is actually going to go on what we call on-chain. We have off-chain co-located databases that you can store data in, and you can store data back in the source systems and just have pointers on the blockchain. So there's an entire data architecture to the data privacy that you've got to be aware of. Interoperability. Today we have Hyperledger, we have Ethereum. I'm sorry, I keep coming over here because that light is like right in your eyes if you're up here. But you have Hyperledger, you have Ethereum, you have digital assets, you have a handful of other proprietary blockchains. You've got R3 Corda, which isn't quite a blockchain, right? What happens when I'm a business and I've got 3 or 5 or 10 of these running? How many blockchains am I going to have, and how are they going to talk to one another? So you've got to think about the interoperability and how that's going to work. And then finally to this, with the regulatory, the policy. So I said earlier when we were on the panel, this is a global technology. This is transnational, right? Across the board. So whose regulation do I have to abide by? Do I need to be concerned with, does everybody know what GDPR is? The data privacy that's coming out of the EU. Basically, it says you have the right to be forgotten. You as an EU citizen, and I think this will happen in the United States here very shortly, you as an EU citizen have the right to be forgotten. How does that impact if you're on an immutable blockchain? Do I have to, if I'm here in the United States with a node, do I need to abide by that regulation? So these are all considerations that you have to think about, and stuff that these are the kinds of things that are creating a little bit of hesitation as people are trying to work through what are the answers to these questions. And so that will take me to the final thing that I was kind of saying, I'm kind of done with the technology discussion. And you also heard this today, but I cannot impress you enough with the fact that the technology is the easy part here. I'm going to say it again, the technology is the easy part. We have a global community, which hopefully you all, some of you all will be members of, that are going to solve these problems. The business operating paradigms are the hard part. And I'm hoping another subset of you all are going to solve those problems. And the reason I'm telling you that is you don't have to be a computer science major, right? You do not. Does everybody know what design thinking is? Right? Okay. Some of you? Well, what design thinking embraces, and I think there should be a blockchain thinking that goes right along with it. Although we often use design thinking when we do our blockchain projects. But design thinking basically says a problem is not insular to any one given piece of the problem. Right? So it's nice if you have somebody that can draw the pretty pictures. It's nice if you have somebody that can code the system. It's nice if you can have somebody that can verify that the functionality is actually the way it should work. It's nice that you can have somebody that will go out and test the market, right? And draw up the nice marketing materials. But the fact of the matter is that the project as a whole doesn't succeed unless that team comes together. And wouldn't it be good if that team came together in the beginning, or at least in small pieces and parts as it moves along, as an integrated team to make this thing successful? And blockchain is very much the same way. It is a piece of technology that you need to pay attention to. The technology is definitely foundational, but it's not going to happen with a lot of other things happening around that technology. And this consortium we've talked about, which is at the core of it, it is an ecosystem. Remember, it's not a party of 1 or 2, it's a party of 5, 10 million. You have to have some way. Who owns the blockchain? I love this when I ask it in a government audience, and especially when they get the answer. Who owns the blockchain? This is where you guys answer.
Us.
Everybody in the public. Who owns the blockchain in a permissioned blockchain?
Businesses.
The involved parties.
It is. It's the consortium. So how does that run? What are you going to abide by? Where are you getting the talent? Who defines what the compliance is? what happens when you start to repurpose jobs? Those all have to be answered for you to implement a successful blockchain project. You cannot leave any of those out. And you have to convince the entire consortium that the answers that you're coming up with are going to be of value to every single one of them in some way, shape, or form. So what I want you to take away from this is, number one, you don't have to be a technologist to live in this world. Number two, this is a mind-bending technology and new business paradigm. There are a lot of really tough problems that need your brains and your creativity to solve. And so I want you to take away that no matter what you're doing, no matter what your major is, you can potentially impact the world you're going to live in, because you will live in a distributed ledger technology world. It's just a matter of what you choose to do there. So thank you, and I'll take questions. Any questions? Oh, yep.
Good. So you spoke a lot about the importance of business-minded and business operations within kind of the puzzle of blockchain and creating solutions. So my question to you is, what opportunities does Deloitte offer for, say, internships and recent graduates, as well as some things you can see as perceivably being offered in the future, as somebody that's going to graduate in the next couple of months?
So we do, so we have a very robust college ecosystem. We run summer internships, and then we also have something called Summer Scholars for more of the master's degree candidates. And we also hire thousands of people annually. I mean, it's pretty significant. Within the blockchain, we are targeting specific, and it's one of the reasons I'm here, because I am looking at universities that have blockchain programs or are trying to develop them. Because I do believe, so I have two interests there. One is it has a tendency to be very technically driven, and I believe that technically we do need that expertise, but I think we need expertise beyond just the technical. And two, I want to talk to those universities about sending people our way. And so, as I said, we have the internships, we hire, we do all of that. Within Deloitte, what we're doing is we have actually structured, we started this with machine learning, and we've now gone to blockchain. We have something called the Guild. And it really is done much along the lines of the medieval guilds, where there were masters and there were apprentices. Deloitte feels very strongly about its apprenticeship model, but in these specifically, we delve into the subjects. Machine learning is definitely very technically focused. With the blockchain guild, we're doing a technical stream, but we're also doing a non-technical stream. Where you learn a lot more about the frameworks and, you know, what are some of the business models and what are some of the other things that need to be thought about. That's what we're doing within, to try and take in talent that has come. I forget what the number is of graduate, college graduates that we hire per year, but it's significant. And, take that talent, look for a profile, and then bring that talent forward. I can't see anything, sorry. Anybody else have questions? And to all you females that are in the room, I applaud you. This is a topic where we are not seeing a lot of female participation. And I would hope that you continue to have this interest in it, you continue to move forward, in a world where you can really have an impact. Okay, oh, sorry.
Question. I have a token that we created for our industry,
Mhm.
and I think we literally ran into every single thing you said there. We tried to make our own model where, we simulated everything worked technically fine. We also ran into, when we talked to the participants, that they had IP that they didn't want to share with their competitors in the consortium. And so how do you, I guess we kind of ran into a brick wall many times, and it's discouraging. Maybe we bit off more than we could chew, but it's a void. How do you get over each of these hurdles?
So,
Do you have a methodology?
yes, so we are building a framework based on battle scars in that very same world. One of the things that we found, so one is, I'm very serious that now when a client comes to me and they say they want to do a proof of concept, I highly encourage them to find at least 2 partners so that there's a triumvirate, if you will, the 3 of them, to come to the table. And what that makes you do is really think about what's the value to the people that have to be in your ecosystem. So what are some of the most critical players that if at the end of the day you have a great product, but you don't have that ecosystem, who are those people that it just wouldn't go anywhere? And try and get them into to the table, because it really does become a value discussion. The second is you can be a leader. So Walmart and Maersk, right? They're doing it with the stick right now. And I work a lot with government, so government can mandate. And we're seeing a lot of that at the state level. There's a lot of legislation being passed. But for the average business and the average idea, you really do have to figure out, and it's a different exercise, because it's not, I have this great idea and it's gonna work. Now it's like, what is the value prop to this entity and what's the value prop? The other thing that I think is misconstrued is this whole permissionless versus permissioned, and getting the conversation directed correctly, because for the most part, one of the things we have been able to prove is, and we've built an entire system that's going to pilot on this, is not all data is created equal and not all data is shared. So we have a system where we're using a permission blockchain. It is built on the Ethereum. It is not on the mainnet. It's on a private instantiation with parity. And so we use something called the proof of authority consensus mechanism. But what we did was we co-located a MongoDB with each of the nodes, and they have different data schemas. So not all the data is replicated to every single one of the off-chain MongoDBs that in the same schema. However, there are pointers such that if someone else needs access to that data for some reason and is granted access to that data, they can in fact get it. So there's a lot of creative things that I think aren't coming through that would allow that conversation to be easier. I hear that all the time. Well, I don't want somebody to see my IP. Well, the fact of the matter is they don't need to see your IP if you're doing the privacy stuff correctly.
I was just wondering, how far out do you guys normally build blockchain solutions for your clients? Are you guys pretty much completely building and implementing, or kind of just coming up with ideas and strategies and kind of setting them on the way?
That's a really spot on. Good. I could have placed that question better. No. So when someone tells me they want to do blockchain for blockchain's sake, I run. You should never do technology for technology's sake. I've been in the world a long time, a lot longer than you guys have. I have kids younger than you, older than you. You have to start with a business problem or opportunity. And so we run our clients through at least a one-day lab. And we have a very structured methodology on identifying, the desirability, the feasibility, and the viability of either the opportunity that they've identified or the problem that they've identified. And we actually then go through, and I think Vishanti did some of this, right? Is there a need for structured data? Are there multiple writers? Do you need auditability? Right? There's criteria that we apply to whatever it is that we've identified to be that problem or that opportunity. And only then will we start to talk to them about the potential of building a proof of concept. And we'll always try and get them to do a proof of concept, which we turn out in about a 10-week time period. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was also kind of wondering, like, from your experience at Deloitte, like, just like some previous projects you've been working on, do you guys find yourself kind of like, building on projects like that in a certain niche? Like, is there kind of a specific route that you find yourself, going down, or is it kind of just, like pretty free flowing and, like all over the place? Just kind of some examples.
So give me an example of a niche that you're going down.
Maybe just like, do you find yourself doing a lot of supply chain work over,
Mm.
I feel like that's like a pretty standard, like, private life.
So you're absolutely correct that there seem to be use cases that everybody's sort of glamming onto right now. And supply chain has proven, right, that blockchain's a fairly decent fit for it. I agree with some of the comments that were made that I think there are places in supply chain where it's going to be a better fit than others. But if you go back to the previous conversation, what's happening right now in the marketplace, to be quite honest with you, is everybody hears this word and wants to do something. So they'll come in and they'll go, I gotta do blockchain, right? And if you run them through the lab, and I just had this with the state. The state came in, it was the Secretary of State for the state, came in, sat down, we were calling, and he goes, well, Wendy, tell me which blockchain I should implement, like, what should I do? And I had to say, I'm sorry, but until you tell me what challenges the state's having, I'm not gonna tell you what blockchain you should be doing, right? Or places where the state's strategic plan says they need to be here, and you don't see the way to get there. Right? Then you have a tendency to not be in the niche. But yes, supply chain is it, healthcare is a huge one. Everybody, special patient records, patient consent is a big one. Eligibility, so fraud in any kind of eligibility, grants management, oil and gas. I mean, there are some really clear-cut places where this stuff seems to be a good fit. Yep.
One of those great, appreciate the, kind of bringing it to a close. I've been in technology a little bit as well. When you see these shifts, the internet shifts, the cloud shifts, huge winners, huge losers. What Amazon has done to the retail world, what cloud technology has done to the old mainframe and manufacturers and hardware and infrastructure play. At a high level, there's going to be winners and losers when blockchain is adopted. It sounds like until good consortiums come together, it's going to take time. But in general, maybe it's dependent upon each individual industry that embraces it. Can you give us your vision of who might be the winners, who might be the losers? Once blockchain is embraced and you've got consortiums established and permissions, what do you see, where are we here when we have this conference in 10 years?
Yeah, so I wish I could, because I would invest in it. But there's a couple of more broad brush things I would say, and then I'll close. Is number one, what we have today won't be there tomorrow because there's some technical challenges with protocols. I would never advocate at this point going with proprietary blockchain just because of what I just said. And I also think that because of some of the constraints that we're seeing, you're going to see things move beyond the blockchain. And I think things like IOTA are going to be the next wave. And then we've got to start figuring in quantum. And so once we get there, we'll have it. But the premise of what distributed ledger technology is here to stay. And thank you.
Thank you.
already started with this technology meeting next year?
Yes. So, yeah, the answer to that is yes. So the thing about Deloitte, I come out of Deloitte Consulting. Deloitte has 220 member firms, in case you're interested, we are global. And we also have tax, we have audit, and we have advisory, which is Deloitte and Touche that you see, does a lot of risk and cyber, and then we have consulting. So depending on where you fit, and we all work very, very collaboratively, Patrick, together, our tax does a lot of work with startups. Our consulting does some work with startups, but I would say our work with startups, and certainly what I do is I work a lot in the startup community, bringing them forward. As far as, what do they have, does that fit into a solution that my clients are looking for? We're doing one client implementation right now where I'm using a startup into the blockchain in so much that they've been blockchain, but Unbound, we're using an identity called a test. We just brought all these different startups together and then have brought that forward into the solution. Tax helps the startups, especially if you're going to do ICOs or any kind of tokenization, kind of where you're going to fit in that tax law. Audit, obviously, is looking at, how do they audit smart contracts, that kind of thing. So it just depends.
And yeah, you're not, we don't present more questions, so just started to sneak out of here.
That's okay. Thank you, guys, and please stay involved. There are so many ways for you you saw the ones that, what's his name, Charles, was it Charles that put it up there? And then, Hyperledger's always looking for people to help. Ethereum is always looking for people to help. So there's just so many communities. But anyway, thank you and have a great evening.
So at this time, we're going to go through the last raffle winners for the Starbucks gift cards, and then we're going to go through just a closing note, myself kind of reflecting on this journey that we've had with MUBC, and then passing off to Ash and kind of talk about his experiences, kind of taking over, and we hope to go with this organization. But just to go into it, so we have 4 winners for the Starbucks gift cards. We have Gordon Wheeler, James McGuire, Elizabeth Gilbride. I don't want to mess this up, I'm sorry. Lee, I'm sorry. Yi, is that correct? So those are our 4 winners for this raffle, and I think you could, probably the easiest way is just to come up to the stage when you get a chance, and we'll hand them out to you. But to continue on here, again, my name is Patrick Young. Co-founded this organization back in August of 2017. It's been an incredibly exciting and rewarding journey with the mining community and everyone that's put in work to help us get to where we are today. I'd say that one of the biggest things to keep in mind, and just like Wendy mentioned, is if you're interested in this technology, even if it's not going to be your path, your career path, keep it on your radar and stay involved. It really is an incredibly rewarding technology and space to be in, even to just know about. And not only is it a huge differentiating factor for looking into future employment, but it's an incredibly enjoyable and interesting subject. I'd also like to say a personal thank you to the former executive team that we founded this organization with, along with our advisors, Dr. Jeffrey Merhout and Dr. Arthur Carvalho. And I'd also like to say a huge thank you to our new executive cabinet, along and headed by Mr. Ashton Barger. And it's been an incredibly exciting journey, and I couldn't be more thankful for the support that I've gotten from all of you and the people that have helped build this organization and the people that have really helped us build blockchain in Miami and put Miami on the map for this type of technology and this education in this sense. So from me to you guys and everybody else, thank you very much.
especially want to thank Wendy Henry from P&G, Vasanthi Chalasani, or Wendy Henry from Deloitte, sorry. Vasanthi Chalasani from P&G and Charlie Loki from Unify Project. They did know me 2 months ago, and they were like very open to coming to a tiny conference in the middle of cornfields. So I couldn't be more thankful that I'm coming out here today. We're very proud of everyone that helped out to make this conference a success, especially on our executive board, our volunteers, and our advisors. We're gonna congratulate them a little bit later too. So I really hope that you guys took a lot out of this and actually learned a lot. But this is not where it ends. There's a lot more to come after this, and I really hope that you guys get involved. It's going to be kind of the focus of my speech here. So this first conference will greatly fuel MUBC to make bigger and better events with a larger team of dedicated members. I'm very confident that MUBC will be back here again next year to host the second annual MU Blockchain Conference, and I hope that you guys either get involved or come out for it. The goals of MUBC over this next semester is to focus on giving members who are involved real-world experience and real valuable skills. In order to do this, we aim to teach and train over 40 members in skills that will certify them as a blockchain developer. We also intend to create a large network of blockchain enthusiasts through more social events around campus. We want to get the block tank up and running. We want to get the block tank up and running, obtain sponsors, funding, and VCs to come out and be able to pitch them for this huge startup competition. We intend to form a highly skilled team and get a minimum viable project or prototype done for our private incentive blockchain for the club. We will be organizing our fall blockchain hackathon, which we intend to obtain funding and sponsorship for. We will have creative events and meetings with students presenting research, professionals speaking to the club, and joint meetings with organizations on campus like Real Estate Club, which we have in the books for a couple of weeks now. We have, for example, our other incentives and other ways to get involved. With this, we will have things like the MUBC Medium, which we would like to get a full committee actually committed to. We would like to get MUBC exec to actually focus on truly growing the global and national reach of our club through our involvements and initiatives. We also hope to promote up to 10 directors by the end of the semester. Looking past this semester, there are some visions that I've had, and I know the founders have had as well. We see MUBC as being a prime talent pool for blockchain development, and hopefully the best that Ohio has to offer. We are actually doing this right now through our involvement in the Mausfeld Labs University program, which actually has a global membership of 75 clubs and organizations from universities. We hope to actually form a consortium of Ohio universities and organizations that can collaborate and communicate easily and efficiently. We hope to maybe create events with them and do some sort of things for all of Ohio to get involved in, all of the universities around. Also, in many years, I hope that I can look back on my time in this club as one that helped set the foundation for one of the biggest and best universities doing blockchain clubs in the Midwest. We intend to compete and give them a run for their money for schools like UC Berkeley, Stanford, UPenn, Carnegie Mellon, MIT. They have a lot of real work, they have a lot of real experience, and we would compete with them and do better than them. Now, I want to go a little bit through the specific people that actually helped us out today. There's a few photographers. I want to thank Katie over here, Thomas Wright, Matt Martin, a few other people for the raffle, Ian, Torsten, a couple other people for tracking attendance. This is older slides, it doesn't have everything on it. But Alex Kwan, who helped out a lot with the MUBC table, Ika Soriano, who helped out technical backstage and also doing some photography. And then I want to go through our executive board. These guys did an amazing job helping everyone out and making sure that this runs very, very smoothly. Jake Salerno, our VP of Marketing, Daria Desai, our VP of Projects, Billy Becker, our VP of Finance, Karan Gupta, our VP of Professional Development, Jack Gilchrist, our VP of Blockchain Research, Raj Chag, our VP of Communications. And also our advisors, Jeffrey Mirhout, who's an associate ISA professor, and Arthur Carvalho, who is an assistant ISA professor, and actually the ISA 481 blockchain course professor. He's doing a phenomenal job, and couldn't be more happy with his course that he has going on right now. I also want to thank Patrick Young. He's done a phenomenal job at this conference, basically leading most of it, and he's done a phenomenal job, and we're definitely going to miss him after he graduates this semester. And he laid an incredible foundation along with the rest of the founders as well, and we want to really thank them for all they've done for us. Please give a round of applause for everyone that helped out with this conference. So if you could please share your experiences on social media with hashtag MUBC, watch our recordings of the event on YouTube for more detail, and follow MUBC on our social medias. Lastly, I want to say one more thing, and that's I hope you will support our initiative in this club, and I hope that you will actually get involved and focus on understanding blockchain technology and making sure that you actually can have real experiences with it. The only thing I really have to say is get involved, and you will not regret it. Thank you.